Oh.
Good. Oh, hi, didn't see you there. Leg day today. Calvin's with us again. This is going to be a recurring.
What's going on, guys?
This will be a recurring theme. Leg day again. YouTube Fitness. I don't understand it. It's going to be the same shit over and over and over and over again. Posterior focus lower day. We're going to start front hamstring curl. We're going to go honestly just bodyweight walking lunges, leg press, the pendulum press, and then just like seated calf raises. And that's going to be the session. Running around like an idiot today, as you can see. If you have any questions, leave them down below. This is third leg day of the training block, so if the needle's starting to move a little bit, performance should be going up week on week now until it stops, and then we're going to switch the program around mid-October. So yeah, that's what the store today, posterior day, Calvin Burgess, Alora, Big Screen Media. Let's wake up here. Yeah, I mean, torn right quad, prepping for a meet 3 years ago. So like, the femur becomes really unstable because I tore the VMO. Yeah. So like, that right there, meant to be down here. So it's just like, femur's unstable at the knee, it's going to be more demand of stability at the hip. So it's just like a constant uphill battle. That's the thing, if you watch the last video, it's the same warm up as I do for my quad dominant because it's the same hip. All right, like the same hip joint that has to do both things. The hip joint has to do one thing, and we use that one thing to do either quads or hamstrings or glutes or whatever. But yeah, so it's always. It's like the function structure thing. It's like there's a breakdown in structure. It's like, well, I need to outfunction it. So it's always it's an uphill battle. So the big thing to focus on, like with so much of your torso, pelvis, and hips like stabilized by the machine, is pay attention to the feedback that the machine gives you, right? Like a lot of people complain of feeling like twisted or feel like they're like, you know, one hip is more forward, especially in the bodybuilding world where symmetry is everything. Like pay attention to the way the machine pushes back. I think I harp on this every single time I'm recorded in front of this machine, but it's such an opportunity where so much of your body is like reinforced, just getting this like these references going like, hey, pay attention. Like one leg is driving harder into the pad, try and use your obliques to tilt your pelvis to make sure that you're symmetrical. You can't be symmetrical here from a functional perspective, and you're never gonna have a chance of being symmetrical under a bar. So that's like a big opportunity that these machines are gonna give you. All right, so moving on to leg press next. We're gonna try and bias like the glute max a little bit more. Common misnomer with glute bias training on leg press is people usually go high and up, so they usually put their feet up here. And so you see, oh, it's for my glutes because you feel a stretch. It's like you don't want to feel a stretch up here. You want to feel a stretch down here. So if the glutes is the primary extender of the hip, right, pushing that hip into extension, the more flexion you can get into, the more you're gonna bias the glute. The trick is to have like a greater change at the angle of the hip than change an angle at the knee. Like understanding just how to bias different muscle groups with like bilateral movements. It's not these drastic changes. So it's like at the outer periphery of all of these different stance permutations is gonna be a decrease in overall load. A decrease in overall load is gonna be a decrease in stimulus. Probably not gonna get any size on anywhere. So rather than going high and out, we're gonna kind of just bring it a little bit narrower relative to your size and shape, and just focus on like this relative angle staying the same at the knee while we go into like basically this, right? That's all you want to think about is this femur just going back and forth like this, and the change at this angle here to be greater then the change at this angle here. And as long as the load stays heavy, you're gonna grow legs. I don't know anyone who's like, my quads are too big, but my glutes are too small, or my glutes are too big, and my quads are too small. So just put weight on it and just lift it.
Good.
Yep. Second like compound multi-doing exercise, still focused on like, you know, more hip extension. The reason we do this one after is given like the pendulum nature of the machine, it's essentially gonna drop off as we get into that deeper hip flexion, where with a linear leg press, 45 degrees, the profile is gonna stay quite consistent. So when we're in that stretch, you know, bottom position, trying to emulate something close to like the stretch position of the glute in like a back squat with the leg press, we're gonna start to really tax the glute in its length and position, because the overload on the leg press is gonna be kind of unrelenting. But with this will give us an ability to drive further into that stretch position, because as the pendulum swings, think of this like a giant clock. As this arm swings at the bottom, it's gonna now start dropping off the tension as that glute's fatigued, not only because it's the second compound movement in a row, but also because it's, you know, relatively fatigued in that joint position, because we just smashed it with a more like unrelenting profile, where this is gonna accommodate for that fatigue we've accumulated and allow us to push a little bit further with our glute into that hip extension. So that's why I pair I don't know fuck else anyone else does, but speaking for me personally, that's why I pair these two exercises the way I do. And pairing it the other way wouldn't make any sense. It'd be like pre-exhausting the length and glute only to smash it with like an unrelenting profile. It like doesn't really make much sense to me. So that's why I like putting these two together, just because we're gonna use that like accommodating resistance as the fatigue sets in to allow us to push that muscle further and further and further. If you're gonna use this machine unilaterally, if you have access to this machine, and really unilateral exercises in general, like thinking about how you would stabilize. So if I'm gonna be here unilaterally, I'm gonna grab across and be like this, right? Opposite shoulder, opposite hip. Give you a bit of that like functional reinforcement through the obliques as they shorten, keep the rib cage stacked over the pelvis, rather than being here for unilateral. If I'm trying to drive output, I'd be here. So, and that's kind of a principle I carry into most of my single leg movements. If I do like a single leg quad extension, I'm gonna be kind of like cross over shoulder to this hip, allow me to stabilize and drive more output. Whereas if I'm back like this with one leg, it's like there's too much going on, you know, to the right of this foot setup. Where here, this is compartmentalized. This is the only thing I have to worry about, is between my midfoot, my hand here, and my hand here. It's blocked this off. And I'm gonna do a bilateral, I'm gonna do 2 legs at a time, but you know, for unilateral movements in lower bodies, to drive more output, drive more stability, sort of like a general rule. Well, that's the thing, like think about how the machine is gonna run, right? Like the drop off is so considerable that you're actually starting to come past 6 o'clock. So the intent of this is the second it crosses 6 o'clock, the intent is now back up. So if you watch my shin angle, that's or like watch your shin angle, or trying to imagine your shin angle, that's the counter vector you're going for, right? So that's why I'm up like this, because that's literally my forearm is matching my shin angle as it comes up, right? Because that's really where this pendulum wants to go, right? So that's where the momentum is gonna carry this machine. So it's like you play sports growing up?
Yeah.
You play rugby? Okay?
Yeah.
That's funny. I just knew he was South African, so I said rugby as he was saying. You pass to where the player's going, not to where he is, right? That's like kind of a hockey thing. The same with this, it's like stabilized to where the momentum is going on the machine. I know that this machine wants to carry back up, so it's like if you're pulling straight back, you're gonna reach a point where this is passing that horizontal, the horizontal vector, and the intent is gonna actually start coming back up.
I think what's throwing me off is I'm bracing, and the drop off is so significant at the bottom. I'm like, what the fuck am I bracing for almost? Like subconsciously, and then I kind of lose it. But okay. Might add something up top.
All your hamstrings and your adductor magnets attach onto like the bone on the bottom of your pelvis. So pushing is gonna create this like global extension, which is going to cause my pelvis to jump forward. At the very least, create an undue vector for me to have to stabilize internally and pull this hamstring underneath, right? Where it's like, if you're here and pushing, you're driving your ribs up, or at the very least making it harder for you to actively drive your ribs down. Where my ribs stacked over my pelvis now is a passive consequence of me pulling rather than something I'm working against myself by pushing, right? Because if I'm here, pelvis dumps anteriorly and I add undue length to an already lengthened position, right? Like I want to be focusing on like contractility, not necessarily elasticity, because this is gonna focus on the hamstring in the lengthened position. So if I'm here, I'm gonna find that lengthened, weakened position earlier as opposed to being here. But if I'm pushing, being here is gonna expend more energy because I'm technically, if I was passive and falling into structure, I'd be back like this. So it's like, well, I can be here pushing and then have to fight actively to draw my rib cage under my pelvis and creating that more favorable profile for the hamstrings by tucking your ischial tuberosity underneath. So for me, it's like if I can just hook my elbows and like still flex the hip, but like posteriorly expand the upper back, whatever the fuck, then it's like that is no energy wasted. I'm like completely locked in, and then that stacked position of like the bowl of the pelvis ready to like accept like this, the thoracic diaphragm and allow that to be passive. It's like I can stabilize and drive the perception of internal stability of the pelvis. Like you have SI joint ligaments that everyone refers to out here, but on the inside of your pelvis, there's an even bigger amount of supporting ligaments like that run from your pelvic floor into like your SI joint and your lumbar spine. So it's like if this stacked position allows me to passively kind of expand my upper back, drive this piston straight down into the pelvic diaphragm, and that allows me to create this internal stability by like eccentrically lowering the pelvic diaphragm on inhalation. That's gonna push out and reinforce from like a muscular perspective the internal ligaments, the SI joint, and it's also gonna allow me to be a little bit more favorable in like that length tension relationship with the hamstring, because I can be in this more like posterior tilt as a consequence of global flexion rather than dumping into this anterior tilt or being in an anterior tilt by like the extension of me being pushed into the pad and then having to fight and use energy here in like a kind of a useless co-contraction where it's like I'm pushing, I don't want to have to draw my ribs down, where if I pull, it's like this is, I just lock in the elbow and I'm in that position already. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
That's my justification.
I'm gonna do a free script weight today.
Super long-winded. Long answer to a short question. Welcome to this YouTube channel.
That's why he is.
Fucking nightmare. Yeah, I'm the guy who talks too much. But I'll also rip a full stack at the end of a hamstring workout.
Good, come on. Easy. Oh, you got more. Yep, come on. Through. Again, come on, finish, drive. Good, man. Hope you don't mind me jumping in.
No, little J. Cole. Good chance. Okay, so doing 2 leg sessions this training cycle, and at the end of both leg sessions I'm doing like a calf movement. Now the other leg workout is, hold on, okay. The other leg workout is like much more quad dominant, and this one's much more hamstring dominant. So the reason I'm choosing seated after the hamstring dominant is that seated is going to disadvantage the gastroc, so like the higher set calf muscle that helps flex the knee. So seeing as we've done a lot of knee flexion in this exercise and loaded a lot of hamstring, especially more than we do in the other session, it's like the gastrocs have probably already like contributed a fair amount to that initiation of the first 15 degrees of knee flexion. So it's like, you know, coming in now and being able to load the soleus technically a little bit more with the gastrocs that's already kind of fried. And then on the days where I'm training more quad, training the soleus, which acts as that secondary knee flexor, where they're a little bit more fresh because we're not doing knee flexion work, we're doing knee extension work. So that's kind of like how I justify, you know, putting the different, you know, knee flex versus knee extended calf variations at the end of either leg day. This is meant to be more like soleus based. So we might bounce around from machine, although this Atlantis one is pretty deadly. So I'll probably stick here for the duration of the training cycle on that hamstring dominant leg day. And then on the quad dominant leg day, I really like that Atlantis incline. So you guys saw that in the last video. But it's a little bit of a justification as to why we pick, or why I pick the exercises that I'm picking. You know, calves are usually a stubborn point for most people, myself included. But just having these little, just this little bit like extra depth in your thought process can go like a long way in like getting the results that you want. All right guys, so finished up leg session, definitely the most productive one yet, and hopefully I say that every session coming down the pipe. So finished on a bit of calf raises, had a little bit of an explanation as to why we order the calves the way we do the quad and hamstring bias days. But that's really it. Special thanks to Calvin for coming out. You're gonna see him a lot more on the channel. I'm gonna just fucking move down this way. But that's really it. If you guys have any questions for either of us, the Instagrams. With a C. Yeah, dude. Kelvin, what are you measuring temperature in like 1942? Like what the fuck is Kelvin? Isn't that the thing with the dog and the Calvin and Hobbes? Yeah, the tiger. Yeah. You read at a 4th grade level, which if you're into bodybuilding. But yeah, that's it for the session. If you guys have questions, comments, anything like that, leave them down below. If you want to see anything, let me know, and if like it's a tutorial video, I might just do it. If it's not a part of my training cycle, I'm just fucking not going to do it, but I might consider doing it in subsequent training cycles. But that's it. Do the thing with the like and the subscribe and all that, and we'll see you next time.